Hello, everyone, Substack and YouTube friends. Happy to be here again today to delight you, hopefully, and entertain you with dialogue, an authentic dialogue. I hope it will be with Daniel Keenan, who is a philosopher, a mystic, Christian Gnostic, and an alchemist living in Prince Edward Island, one of my favorite provinces of Canada, I'm sure, except I've never been there, but I have a feeling it's one of the few places I have not been, but I hope to visit someday. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah,
And
we'd love to have you.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, hopefully one of these days. So it's really great to have you here. And we have a series of interviews and dialogues and just looking at the world situation, which very much includes our inner psychology and spiritual reality, as well as sometimes the outer reality and geopolitics and what's going on. And I'm really happy to have you here to share some of your perspectives.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been kind of astounded at the world recently, as I'm sure most of us are. The pace of change and yeah, everything. Just seems like 3 days later, the world is a different place than it was.
That's something that I've noticed. I've always attributed to something to do with getting older, but I hear from friends and colleagues who are middle-aged or younger even, and they say, no, they're noticing it too. The time seems to be quickening. Um, so that's a phenomenon, which may have some basis in the planets and the sun and the moon and all that kind of stuff, or spiritual, psycho-spiritual adaptation.
Yeah, I believe that it's definitely, uh, well, I think we should give more credence to our perception in general. When we think something's real, it usually is. So when we perceive this speeding up of time, I think it's a real thing that's happening.
Mhm. Yeah, perception itself is it's almost like a whole, we have the physical realm and the astral plane or the emotional realm and the mental, the intuitional and the spiritual and so on. But perception itself is almost like a realm unto itself. It's fascinating. The perceptual faculties of listening deeply and seeing and noticing, it seems to bleed into, so to speak, the intuitional realm quite easily.
Yeah. It's to me that's what being a Gnostic means is basing our reality or our beliefs on our perception. So instead of having a set of doctrine that you subscribe to and don't necessarily question, it's basically a philosophy of open-mindedness, but also being always searching for new experiences and experimenting, kind of being a scientist in a spiritual level. Yeah.
Questioning everything and testing it. Mhm. Very much so. So it's these days, there's so much information, of course. It's a plethora, to say the least, from every possible source, um, some more reliable than others, and a lot of fake news, of course. And it's hard for people to know what to believe because the mainstream media is called is very slanted and partial in its reporting of what's going on. And so I guess maybe that would be one, being able to trust our own intuition and our own perception um, as one very important medium to learn what the truth, so to speak, reality.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, to me, what I try to do when I'm consuming the news or investigating the world is whenever I hear someone speaking about, with their opinion or their emotions, I instead of judging what they're saying from my perspective, I try to put myself in their shoes and think, why are they saying this? Why do they believe what they believe? And if I can empathize with them and understand why they're saying that, then I believe it gives me a clear uh, totality of truth. If I listen to multiple perspectives and I can understand,
Yeah.
I can put myself in the shoes of everyone who's speaking about these things from a different, completely opposite perspective, then hopefully it gives me a balanced view.
And just thinking of the spectrum, which has the seven major colors and then thousands of subdivisions. But if we only had a couple of colors, um, we'd be so limited in our appreciation of reality. But we're able now to, and it's interesting, they say that back in the Middle Ages, I think, that, or was it in the days of Greece, um, people could not see as many colors of the current spectrum. For example, blue and green were indistinguishable from each other.
Right. I think that's because of the language, partially too, right?
Possibly. Yeah.
Because they didn't have words to describe certain colors, so they didn't think of them.
Yeah, but if they were able to perceive those colors, wouldn't they just invent a word? There's lots of sounds to make words out of. I mean, maybe which came first, the chicken or the egg, or
Yeah, exactly.
which didn't come first. Yeah. So that thought about reality and uh, being able to detect what's real, what's important, and that concept of being able to go into another person's mind or walk a mile in their shoes and moccasins, is the old saying, is when we are, the whole world seems to be going towards unity, inexorably, but necessarily too. And at the same time, there's more and more division and polarization and breaking things up, atrophy. So these two dynamics seem to be unfolding simultaneously. And I see it sort of like an elastic band. If you pull and pull and pull farther apart, the poles, at some point, it's going to snap. And it almost feels like we're cruising for a bruising,
Mm.
if this extreme polarization continues. And we see it in the United States politics, but of course that affects the whole world. And it's a global phenomenon. It's not just American, but things are always more intense there. So how can we, talk with people? Because people are so afraid and opinionated and angry. Uh, how can we engender this kind of authentic dialogue where we can really listen and have a heart open and be able to see that bigger picture, that 360-degree panorama that you mentioning? Do you have any ideas?
Something I'm still working on, but it's interesting. I do have some strong opinions, and a lot of times I'll get, attacked or people angry at me for expressing how I feel. And something I've been trying recently is actually taking the thing I described earlier of understanding why they think they do and actually just reflecting that back to them in the conversation. So instead of continuing to assert my beliefs or my perspective, I just give them more information that confirms their bias.
I see. Well, I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned that because when you were talking about practicing becoming detached from other people's strong opinions, equanimity, I was wondering, I wonder if you have some, I was going to ask you actually, do you have some strong opinions? So I'd love to hear one.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Give me a
Give the,
category.
give the audience a thrill and
You want a wild conspiracy theory? Is that a good one?
anything at all. Just something you feel strongly about, that you have conviction, and that can
Yeah.
always change, of course, but in the meantime,
Well, I think extraterrestrial life is real and that we're kind of within it all the time. There are other beings among us all the time, and actually, I think there's a event coming called disclosure where these kind of secrets about our own history and this reality of the galaxy is going to be revealed. And I think that event is a lot sooner than many people think.
I've watched some of the videos of that fellow. I can't remember his name, Dr.
Oh, Stephen Greer, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate him, and I would love to. interview him someday. I'm sure he's a very busy guy, but you never know. So yeah, well, a lot of people do more than ever, right? Are
It's
accepting.
true, yeah. It's funny because 20 years ago, if we think if aliens were revealed on the news or something, everyone would be up in arms. Wow, that's amazing. Now it seems like, yeah, it's just another day.
We can evolve so fast. I mean, there's this quickening again, not only the sense of time, but what happens within time. I mean, the internet recently, a couple of decades ago, um, three maybe, was a paradigm shift, big one, right? Like the printing press back in Germany in the 1500s or whenever it was. And now AI just again,
Yeah.
a major paradigm shift. So it's like one paradigm shift after another. What'll be next?
And it's interesting, AI actually brings us back to the topic of truth because now with AI, you can generate a video of anything, and soon it's going to be indistinguishable from reality. So
Exactly.
the only way you're going to be able to decide what's true is by developing your intuition and your own truth, your own inner truth.
Uh, so this may be the key, a key, that people become so frustrated, feeling blocked from good news, reality, that they are forced to develop their latent faculties of a higher intuition. How do you do that?
It's well, meditation, I think, is the only really way I know, but it's interesting. What I see right now is kind of these reality bubbles. So there's groups of people kind of have a consensus and they bounce that consensus off of each other and it makes it stronger. So they have these
Right.
bubbles of people that believe in this thing so strongly and kind of the world is pressing in on these bubbles and making them more and more constrained and less flexible until I think at the core of those reality bubbles is a fear of change or a fear of expansion or a fear of otherness, right? So this fear to break out of this reality. And I think those bubbles are going to become smaller and more brittle. And there's going to be so many things trying to poke holes
Hmm.
that eventually you're either going to be stone or you're going to shatter. I think there is, when you're saying we're going towards unity and this divisiveness at the same time, I do think there are two outcomes, and we do have a choice as a human on this time at Earth to accept what's going on, or kind of who's to say what the outcome of if you don't accept it will be. But I think it's possible to actually die from fear in a way.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
become so fearful, so constrained that you just stop living.
Yeah, some people die in their dreams. They're having a scary dream and they have a heart attack or whatever. You know, the image that comes up for me is an idea too, is that we live in an expanding universe, like astronomically, physically, the galaxies are moving apart. Um, Yet at the same time, our ability, not only our technology, our science, but also our spiritual faculties that we've been talking about, our intuition and perception and so on, are increasing. So there's something about all those bubbles cascading in on each other it's there's so much control. People are so afraid, and we're trying to control things, and it makes them
Mm.
very smushed up and uncomfortable, right? It's like, "Ugh, give me some elbow room." And so if we can, you hear more and more, just let go, let God and let go, acceptance, radiant acquiescence, and don't try to hang on as attitudinal change. So if we could just imagine those planets and suns and just gently expanding, but we're still even more connected with them at the same time. So there's another paradox. So we can give people their space, respect, listen to them and respect their point of view and feel, the way they feel, perhaps to understand them. So that's like giving them space and finding our own space so that we can expand and be ourselves, but by the same token and at the same time, ever more unified with them. It's a beautiful kind of a paradox that we can be one, humanity, for example, without prejudices and racism, etc., and misogyny and homophobia, etc. They accept everybody. Everybody's good. Everybody's okay. Buddha says, there's a basic goodness at the foundation of all human beings, and at the same time, sort of creating our own power or liberating our own power and helping others to do the same. So we're all leaders in a sense, but we all lead together. We co-mentor each other.
Yeah, it's one thing that comes to mind. Oh no, my cat's starting to make noise. Is talking about this constrained reality, and when we're in that bubble, we only see the walls, but actually everything we're perceiving is inside of ourselves. So if we're seeing someone else as this hateful tyrant or this angry person, um, we can't actually see anything that isn't contained in us.
Right.
So it's especially when it comes to day-to-day interactions, like if you come across someone who's just, there's a lot of people having breakdowns these days, right? Because of everything going on. So uh, it's like, I feel in the past it was a much slower process, much gentler process of, these little things we could see in our partner, and eventually we figure out what's causing us to see those faults. And if we change something in ourselves, it actually changes the relationship. But now it seems like everywhere we go, we're just confronted with these massive things. And I think it is because of that time speeding up and this speeding up of evolution that we're just, it's a blessing and a curse, because if you take advantage of the opportunity that is this time, you can grow so fast because there's always challenges. You're never want for opportunity.
That's a good way to put it. People are always looking for a bargain, right? How can more? Pay less, get more. And this is a time chock-a-block full of opportunities for growth. So as time is a quickening, there's the quickening afoot. Likewise, we can quicken in our evolution and unfolding of who we truly are. Yeah. So a question I often ask a guest is, for a fairly young feller, you have some spacious ideas and perceptions. So I'm just wondering in your life up till now, if there was a point, even when you were very young or a teenager or a bit younger as an adult, that was a kind of a turning point for you spiritually or psychologically. They're sort of interwoven, right? The psycho-spiritual dynamic that sort of caused you to go in a different direction or open up to something new. For example, you mentioned that you're very much involved now with studies of Gnosticism and, excuse me, alchemy, or earlier iterations of your spiritual journey. Is there anything you'd like to share in regard to that?
Yeah, there's so it was in the transition between 2010 and 2011, so kind of November, December, January, February, I went through what you could call a spiritual crisis, dark night of the soul, that kind of event.
Wow.
And my memory is kind of choppy from that time. It's almost like I wasn't in linear time at that.
Yeah.
But the key, if I bring it down to an actual moment, the key was actually just laying. I was in university at the time, and I think the stresses of being independent and having all these responsibilities was part of the triggering for that event. But I was lying on my bed in my dormitory and meditating, and it's almost like I felt reality start to spin, and I just kind of, it was like circling down a drain, and I just dropped down into the void. You've probably heard of that term in meditation.
Yeah.
Um, so and I think before that, in the same time, I was praying for the opportunity to face all my fears as quickly as possible, which is a pretty dangerous prayer to make.
Asking for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and then over the next few months, I had that recurring experience of the void a couple more times, and it was more intense each time until after a few weeks, I ended up in the psych ward in Ottawa, where I was going to university. And when I was in the hospital, I actually had probably the most visceral, non-physical experience you could say of my life, where I had the experience of devolution. It almost felt like going into the ground and becoming an amoeba or a single-celled organism
Mhm.
and feeling like these other organisms around me, and then this ascension back into a more complicated life and rising up into the sky. And then eventually it became this, can't describe it as anything but a light. Like it was just, or a tone, right? A rising tone. And eventually it just kind of, I actually don't even know if I can remember how it ended, to be honest. But it just seems like it kind of
Maybe it's still going
became,
on.
well, good point. Yeah, became reality. So yeah, from that point on, I feel I've been, even in moments where I've been in a very difficult situation or kind of in my head or stressed out or feeling anxiety, I've had this perception of almost like someone over my shoulder, uh, this knowing that it's all going to be okay.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, maybe there's somebody from the spirit realm or whatever you want to call it that's got your back.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I believe it's just my higher self, my own identity, and the higher plane of existence.
Yeah.
And I try to. One thing that's been very helpful for me lately is actually consciously connecting with that energy in meditation and throughout life. Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, how you do that, if you can share. And I know that it's difficult to find words sometimes to describe these
yeah,
mystical transformational experiences. But we can, if we try, we can find words that are optimal, at least. Certainly not the same as the experience itself. But when you were describing that kind of a breakdown, they say you have to break down before you break through.
yeah,
Right? And as an esoteric astrologer, Pluto, which is the planet of breaking down those barriers in our path towards that are in the way of our evolution. And Pluto has just moved into Aquarius for the next 35 years or something like that. So individually and for humanity, those blocks that have remained in our path that we often have created ourselves. As the Buddha said, again, to quote him, most suffering is self, created. Um, the neurotic crimes, as he called them. But so, in a way, that transformation sometimes can come from feeling that we're breaking up. Like in the shamanic tradition, they call it the soul retrieval, that the soul is like a mirror which shatters into different pieces. So the shaman accompanies the client, the patient, to go down into matter, into the well where the pain is, and collect those shards of broken mirror and to put them back together again and then come up with that new wholeness. But it's a wholeness this time with more consciousness. So that going down into the earth, as it were, and the amoebas, the smallest little animals of our animal brothers and sisters, it's like that journey to death in a way, because
yeah,
many cultures, when we die, we're buried in the earth and we gradually decompose. That's not the word you use. It was deconstruct or discompose, something like that. Anyway, But yeah, we sort of dissemble into little tiny pieces, almost to nothingness, and then bring it back together, reconstruct. So then when we start to ascend, as you say, back into the mind and the spiritual realms, we have a new kind of alignment of our essential humanness, the animal part of us included, body, somatic, with the heart and the mind and the spirit. Wow, so thank you. So back to the you said in your meditation you have a way of kind of reinforcing or cultivating that alignment or a unity with your true self, your higher self. Is there
Yeah.
any particular technique or something you could give us a little?
So after, um, I can't remember how I meditated before that experience that I just told you about, but
Right.
um, I have a distinct memory of, I think it was about a year after that event. I had developed a pain in my wrist, and then I was like move my hand and it'd be really like like shards of pain.
Okay.
And I was actually at a music festival at the time. We had tickets for like a 2 week long music festival, but it was really storming on one day, so we couldn't go out. And I laid down on the bed we were staying at, and must have been 4 or 5 hours. I just laid down and just focused my awareness on the pain in my wrist.
Hmm.
And through just that experience of allowing that pain to be and accepting it and loving it, and that eventually it was like the experience, it's almost like bubble wrap, like popping bubbles. The
Yeah.
pain kind of bubbles away at the end.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So
And often it's accompanied by like actual twitching of the muscles.
okay.
When you fully release something, your muscles start to go like pop, 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 pop. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I'd say the majority of my meditation now, other than a couple of kind of experiences that I go through, like creating a shield and different things, but the majority of the time I spend is just allowing the sensations in my body to draw my awareness, and just having the intention of relaxing, opening up, and that just takes me wherever I want to go, my body wants to go. Actually, just a few minutes before we started this interview, I was meditating for a little while, and I felt the meridians in my legs open up, and just I could feel the energy coming up from the earth and enter the bottom of my body. Like it was kind of it was getting stuck there. I wasn't able to move past maybe some kind of block, but yeah, it was a pretty
Well,
cool
thank
experience.
you. I think that's very wise and to honor this soma, the body. And because even when we have emotional pain, it doesn't have to be physical necessarily. Emotional pain or mental pain or spiritual pain, even nearly always there's some manifestation on the physical body, or at least in the so-called etheric body, which is the subtle body, which is part of the physical plane. So if we're sensitive and give ourselves that space again, um, and time and mindfulness, attention, inward attention, we can locate where in our etheric body or physical body is the discomfort or the compression maybe or tension, and then just acknowledge it. And it's part of that Chiron, who was the centaur, the wounded healer, that archetype. It's like instead of running away from pain,
Mm,
opposite, turn towards the pain or the suffering, the wound, and embrace it. Because we all have that inner child, the little boy, the little girl, um, who's still hurting. And probably not many people have cleared up everything, we still have trauma and triggers and all kinds of stuff. So just looking at that little boy inside, in my case, just saying, little Hugh, when he was 6 years old and he was confused or his parents were fighting, and he was upset and scared and so on. It's just sort of holding him, embracing and saying, "Hey, I'm with you now. You're not alone. Everything's going to be okay." And just by turning to the pain, it starts to dissipate.
Yeah.
It's magical. And that's then leads to the healing and integration, more integration.
Yeah, if I had to describe, there's another way I think of it, when I meditate, just that feeling of openness and relaxing. It's almost like seeking the void,
Oh, yeah.
because it's such a scary thing, the void, especially if you've never experienced it. It can feel like, it is, like you said, the fear of death itself, right? This kind of primal fear. But
Yeah.
I felt that once I experienced it, maybe a few times, maybe the first time, I feel that fear of death actually turned into a yearning for death in a way, or a seeking of the void. And I actually, I feel it's almost like every time I meditate, I'm ready for that experience, right? Like I'm ready to completely
Right.
go into nothingness. And I do feel that there's layers to it. Like it's not like once you go through the void, you're gone, you're done, right? There's deeper and deeper layers of the void you can experience. So it's a never-ending process.
Well, in the West, we no, it's a generalization, the East and the West, and more and more it's kind of a global culture, but still, those spiritual traditions from the East, including Buddhism and Hinduism and so on, they do include that idea of emptying or nothingness. And whereas in the West, we seem to be more primed for somethingness or everything. And both are good. Um, but there seems to be a fear, especially in the West, of that kind of letting go, of losing the ego is terrifying.
Yeah,
What would I be?
yeah.
Nothing. Well, what's so bad about being nothing? Or maybe within the nothingness, there is a somethingness and an everythingness.
Or that nothingness is the wholeness.
Exactly. So could you give us one little hint? I know it's so hard again with words, but when you start to get into that void, as you call it, well, not just you, many people, uh, could you give us a couple of descriptors of what you experience at least? Is it like you feel lighter or as if you're heavier going down into the earth or titillation or excitement or
I think the only time I can actually describe is the one that I already did, the going into the earth. Um,
did,
it's almost like every other time, it's like the memory ceases to work. So you experience something, and then when you come back, you can't actually remember where you were.
okay, the memory hmm.
And now, actually, I didn't think of it for the before, but now that we're talking, I'm noticing that experience that I had of going down and then up, and I think they're actually connected. The When I went down and then when I went up, maybe they go to the same place.
We're so sort of programmed to think in polarity, right? Duality,
Yeah.
up and down. I mean, we talk about the creator God. We always look up as if it's up and
Mm,
if we were standing on our head for some reason. I used to do that as a kid. My mother
yeah.
learned to stand on my head. It would be down. God would be down. So
Uh,
all relative,
Maybe
right?
we need to look in.
There you go. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we could talk for hours. You're so thoughtful, and I love the way that you're experimenting with the inner and the outer, your own true self, that quest of finding it, cultivating it, and developing it, protecting it, and then at the same time just letting go of everything and deconstructing, going back to ground zero, and then coming back up again. Yeah. There are a lot of little clues, that you have dropped, that we have dropped in our dialogue. I tend to think of these uh, conversations more like an authentic dialogue than an interview.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been very creative, and I hope you'll come back again sometime.
Thank you.
I'll come back now.
Yeah, it's been a good experience. Thank
Oh,
you.
great, great, thanks. And to the viewers, both on Substack and this will also be transferred to our podcast on YouTube. Look down below, and uh, Daniel also has a Substack channel, so I would recommend that you go there, read some of his writing, and also thank you for being subscribers on Substack and both on the podcast as well. The podcast. Uh, so I hope you will continue tuning in, and there's going to be a lot of very interesting subjects that we're going to explore. And you also have on the Substack an opportunity to be a paid subscriber as well. There will be a little button below if you feel generous and would like to support my work, and that would be much appreciated, but certainly not expected. So have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and thanks again, Daniel.
Goodbye.
Bye.